Yeah, I really think so. I mean, I think both sides, were somewhat encouraged by last year and what went on. I mean, from Bradford's side, his knee held up. He got through the season. He missed a couple games with the shoulder injury and a concussion, but the knee was the main thing, and he got through the year with that. He started to feel a little more comfortable playing the game with his teammates and all that stuff. I don't think he ever looked 100% comfortable in Kelly's offense, but, he seemed to enjoy it and seemed to be doing pretty well with it. From the Eagles' point of view, they got a guy, they should have extended him last year when they traded for him, but they didn't. But, they got to see him for a full season and see him get better as the season went on, as he got more comfortable with everything. And his last 7 games, everybody almost makes fun of you for bringing that up, but, those last 7 games, I mean, he only had 1 game with a quarterback rating under 90 in those 7 games. They didn't translate into a lot of wins. If he'd beaten the Redskins in that last game against them, and the Eagles had won the NFC East, we'd be talking about it totally differently. But he played pretty well against most of those teams. And, both sides got enough of a glimpse of what it could be. Things went well. And but they didn't sign up for a 5-year or 6-year deal, which would have been, one good first date and you get married. This is more like one good first date, now you're going to try like a weekend together. So they have a little bit of time. They can, he'll be probably more comfortable, I think, in this offense. It's going to be a little more typical NFL offense at the Wild to make, checks at the line of scrimmage and change plays and do all the things that he couldn't do with Chip Kelly. Not running the tempo thing, I think, is going to be a little easier for him to deal with. In that regard, and see how it goes. And if it's terrible or he doesn't look that good after a year, the Eagles can get out of it. If he's not happy with how it looks, he can, he has only 1 more year under contract. He can get himself probably out of the deal, and then he can be a free agent. He'll be a free agent again before he's 30. So there's another shot for him to get a bigger deal. And the Eagles have 2 years to, draft or sign one of these other young quarterbacks and see what they can get. If they in 2 years, they'll know if a guy they draft this year is a real player or just another guy that kind of passing through. So, yeah, I think it's a perfect compromise. I'm surprised, it worked out that well. I mean, it just seemed like, you have a really competent agent in Tom Condon, and one thing Howie Roseman is really good at is getting contracts done, and they seem to really, hit the ball out of the park for both sides to feel good about it. Bradford gets paid, totally respectably by NFL standards. But nobody's regretting his deal in 3 years because it'll be over by then.
Phil, the word I used was relevant. Like, I think the Eagles front office wants to remain relevant. They haven't made the playoffs in 2 years. They don't want their new coach that was somewhat a head-scratcher around the league, I guess, to fail in his first year. So, therefore, they needed to find a guy that would make them a relevant football team. Bradford might not win you the Super Bowl, but at least he doesn't make you a 4-12 type of team, and I think they want to make sure that they are in that relevant mix with everybody else. Is that basically their thinking here? Is let's get a guy that just keeps us relevant. We can still draft a guy. He could sit on the bench for 2 years, and once Bradford's ready to move on, he's got a team that's already kind of in the middle. He's not starting at the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly the right read on it. I mean, the headline on that kind of said, Eagles are looking to be contenders this year. I didn't mean that they expect or are putting all their chips in the middle of the table because it's this year or bust.
Right.
I didn't mean it quite like that. I do mean, they want to put a good team. You're playing in a division that you could easily win, given the state of the NFC East last year. And if you can do that and get to the playoffs, then that's a pretty good year. So by doing that, you have a bunch of guys like Jason Peters, Brent Selleck, guys who are on this team. Malcolm Jenkins is re-signed. He's not a young kid anymore. These guys are all on the team, and this is this is the meat of their careers, or near the end of their careers for some of these guys. To tell them, you're going to basically, tank this year and just lose and develop a kid quarterback and try to get the team, in contention in 2018 or 2019. That's a really hard sell for a sport where you have to go and lay your body on the line the way NFL players do. So, this gives everybody a chance. If Bradford, if Bradford really blossoms, if he really takes this Peterson system and, the receivers come along a little bit and the line's better, who knows? I mean, there's no reason they couldn't be a good team. And the defense, I think, just by virtue of having to be on the field for 33 or 40, 34 minutes a game, is going to be that much better. And Schwartz's scheme seems to be very player-friendly. It's an attack defense. You saw the Bills cut Mario Williams. They cut him because he was unhappy playing for Rex Ryan, because he liked it so much the year before playing for Jim Schwartz. So whether the Eagles have a shot at signing him or not isn't the point I'm making, but maybe they should take a swing at it. But, there's a guy, who's like a double-digit sack guy every year, loves playing in Jim Schwartz's system, hated playing in the Rex Ryan system, and now he's on the street. So, that's what Schwartz is bringing here, a system that players are going to enjoy playing in, that's going to allow them to be themselves and be aggressive instead of this two-gapping discipline thing that Bill Davis ran. I think there's a lot of signs that show this team could be, a step above what it was last year. And if somebody, on the defensive side or offensive side really takes a jump forward, they could actually be a good team and possibly win the NFC East.
Phil Sheridan's with us. Sam Bradford gets that big deal. And you mentioned that he could get out of it, or they could get out of it. It's a 2-year deal, $36 million. There's a lot of guaranteed money. What would the hit be if they said after 1 year, you know what, you just stunk this year, we didn't like this fit, we drafted someone, we're going to go that direction? Would they take a major hit, or was it a deal that is friendly enough where they could make cut him after 1 year?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere around $10 million for the salary cap hit for 2017 if they were to cut him after 1 year. But the cap has gone up $10 million or so a year each of the last 2 years, and it's expected to do roughly the same next year. It's all based on the revenues the league's producing, and all those revenues are going up. So it's expected to be a bigger cap. So, if that amount of dead money, is sitting there, it's not a deal breaker for the Eagles. They can still do a lot of other things with the money that will be available to them. But at the same time, the ideal is that, he plays well and you're not trying to get rid of him and eat the dead money. But, it's not the ideal thing to do, have a $10 million dead money hit on your cap, but it's not really the plan. If he's here for 2 years and they have a young up-and-coming quarterback ready to go at the end of it, then that's what they'll do. If he's the best that they can, plan at quarterback or figure to have a quarterback, they would, try to extend them and sign them for another long-term deal, in which case, you have a franchise quarterback in-house. So, it's a pretty risk-free contract for both sides.
Yeah, and, is this, in your opinion, Bradford, why does he get this deal? Is it because of 7 games? Is it because they want to be relevant? Is it because he was the number 1 pick in the draft and people still think he's got something to there? Why does Bradford get this deal from the Eagles? But I would have to assume he gets this deal from the Eagles because he wasn't getting it someplace else, right?
Yeah, that's very likely. I think the answer to the question is basically all of the above. I mean, as we talked about in the past, he's a guy that came out in the 2010 draft. That was a year before the current collective bargaining agreement went into effect, which put the rookie wage scale in place and strictly, prohibited how much money rookies could make, even the highest draft pick. So he got the last first overall pick, giant contract coming out of the draft, that anybody will ever get in the NFL. And so he made $78 million on that contract, most of it from the Rams, the last $13 million last year from the Eagles. And, there was a guy that didn't have any, financial pressure. Right now with the Redskins franchise tagging Kirk Cousins, or the deal St. Louis did with Nick Foles last year, you had guys that were 3rd and 4th round picks in 2012, the same year Bradford came out. But, sorry. That was the year Angelo kind of scratched the last one. But those guys that had 3rd and 4th round picks in 2012, they made about $1 million to $2 million in between there over their career so far. So for those guys, when Foles got to St. Louis, he did a deal, and now they're franchising Cousins because those guys are under pressure to finally get some money. They didn't get any of the draft picks. Bradford had money taken care of, so he was not going to settle for anything less than a market deal. His agent, Tom Condon, he sees the big picture in all this stuff. He wants to make sure that salaries keep escalating for the quarterback position because he represents a lot of quarterbacks, and he wants that. That's a thing that he cares about. He's not going to let Bradford just take a under market deal just to be a nice guy. So he had all that stuff in play. Now, from the Eagles' point of view, they gave up Foles and a 2nd round pick So they've already invested that kind of resource in him. They paid him a fair amount last year. And, Jeff Lurie was saying last year that Bradford was the highest-rated quarterback the Eagles had in any draft since Peyton Manning came out. So that's Andy Reid's evaluation in 2010. And then Doug Peterson obviously has some respect for what Andy Reid thinks. So you have all those factors in place. The quarterback the Eagles thought was going to be a great player. They traded for him as if he was going to be a great player. They paid him like he was going to be a great player. He looked good enough in an awkward situation with new players around him. The offense was a mess last year for a lot of it. I can't really blame him for all that. The running game wasn't going well. The offensive line wasn't very good. And he hung in and stayed healthy and had a pretty good season. I think there's enough pieces in place that they're just sticking with the belief that he's going to be at some point the quarterback everybody expected in 2010, and he's getting paid like that. He hit the lottery basically as the first pick in that particular draft, and he's still cashing tickets 6 years later.
Phil Sheridan's with us, ESPN.com. NFL Nation covers the Eagles. You wrote a piece, I guess yesterday, about how Bradford can thank Chip Kelly for the leverage that he got. I think that was before the deal. But do you think that, that really played a factor that he was here on that one-year deal and that Kelly couldn't get a deal done with him, that overall – I mean, did the Eagles make out, though, that they didn't sign him to a long-term deal? Is this a better deal for the Eagles than it would have been had he got a deal earlier in the season?
Yeah, it possibly is. In that sense, I did write that before the deal was done, and looking at the picture, the point I was making is that in the past, when they made some of these kinds of deals, the deals were contingent upon the Eagles getting a new contract done. They did it with Hugh Douglas in '98. They traded for him with the Jets, but the deal wasn't final until the Eagles negotiated a new contract for Douglas. They didn't want to give up 2 draft picks for a guy who wasn't going to be there beyond that year. So they got the deal done in a day. Joe Banner and Drew Rosenhaus negotiated a contract extension for Douglas. They did it again when they traded for Jason Peters, who was with the Buffalo Bills. They traded for him, but the deal didn't go through and wasn't final until the Eagles did a contract extension with Peters, and they got that done, and he came to Philadelphia and was there for a long time. So that's how you do it. And Howard Roseman would know that. And Joe Banner was the team president when they did those other deals, but I don't think Chip Kelly fully appreciated that. I mean, and he's been an NFL guy over the course of his long career. He's become one now, I guess, and he's probably learning lessons as he goes. He probably learned a lesson there. Because in December he said, well, we wouldn't have traded for him if we only wanted to have him for 1 year. I mean, we wouldn't have made the deal for 1 year. But he made the trade without getting him under contract for beyond a year. They might have been able to do a similar deal last year. They might have had to, invest more over a longer term and be in a situation that, might not be favorable. So in a sense, yeah, they probably did get lucky because Condon and the Eagles were able to work out a deal here that really doesn't create that much risk for the long term. They can really do whatever they want to do at quarterback, in terms of drafting somebody or trying to find a young guy that they can develop. That might not have been the case if they had a huge franchise type deal in place with Bradford. So they probably came out ahead based on all that. But because this deal was so unexpectedly friendly on both sides.
You still think they draft a guy? Maybe not at 13, but they take some. Do they take one? Still is 13 in play, but do you think they, 2 years we draft a guy, we groom that guy? Is that very much in play then?
Yeah, I think so. I think I would be a little more surprised now if they took one to 13. But if they, that'll depend a little bit too. If they fall in love with one of these guys like Paxton Lynch, the Memphis quarterback, if they really believe that guy can be, a special player, he's like 6'7", he's got a great arm. You're talking about some really, big physical guys who don't really have the track record in college to be sure about them. And they all play in systems where they didn't play under center. It's just the college game to the NFL game is a tough transition sometimes for guys in particular colleges and stuff. So I would imagine that if they loved somebody, and Lynch would be the most likely guy that would sort of fall under that category, that they couldn't get in the second round, then they might use the 13th pick on him. I think they're more likely now to take the best player available at 13, maybe get an offensive lineman, Jack Conklin from Michigan State, somebody like that, who can either play guard or move right into right tackle and let Lane Johnson play left tackle and solve that problem for a while. That's the most likely scenario, I think. And then they have two third-round picks. So they could either package them and try to move up to the second round or just use one of the third-round picks on a guy who might be a little more of a project. But because you have Bradford under contract for 2 years, you can do that. You can take a guy that isn't going to have to play with any kind of urgency. Just let him learn and develop, and take your time with him. And when a guy like Aaron Rodgers basically spends 3 years doing that, it turned out pretty well for the Packers. So it doesn't always work that well. Aaron Rodgers is an extreme example, but if the Eagles can get something like that in motion, have a guy that they really believe in, and they can train and groom and develop, the Bradford will allow them to do that, and this contract allows them to do that, and then move on from Bradford if the other guy kind of comes along in the timetable they hope for.
Phil Sheridan, everybody. He's got plenty more over at ESPN.com, NFL Nation, covering the Philadelphia Eagles, at Sheridan Scribe on Twitter. And, again, Phil, man, we figure that the football will be dying down. The Eagles have just not let us. They will not let us get away from this squad.
No, and free agency hasn't even begun yet. So we're getting contracts done left and right, and they haven't even gotten to the open market yet.
Next week, we'll see if the Fletcher Cox deal gets done. All right, Phil, thanks so much, pal.
Yep, anytime, Mike. Appreciate it.